On April 25, 2012, in Parma, Ohio, a disturbing discovery would shake the foundations of the legal community and raise serious questions about prosecutorial conduct. Dawn Pella, a 27-year-old former task force office manager, was found dead in her apartment on the very day she was scheduled to testify about alleged misconduct by prominent prosecutors. Dawn Pella wasn't just another government employee. Born in 1985 to Edward and Karen Pella, she demonstrated an analytical mind and questioning spirit from an early age. Her father would later recall how she questioned everything, always seeking the reasoning behind every directive. This trait, combined with her academic excellence, would eventually lead her to graduate at the top of her class at both Cleveland State and Cuyahoga County Community College. In 2009, Dawn secured what seemed like a promising position as office manager of a multi-jurisdictional mortgage fraud task force working under prosecutors Dan Casares and Mark Bennett. But what began as a dream job would ultimately lead to a series of events that would end in tragedy. The turning point came when Dawn was ordered to infiltrate a Free Tony Viola event, posing as a graduate student. Her mission? To secretly record conversations and obtain confidential defense trial strategy information. She was even instructed to write a check for Viola's legal defense fund, allowing prosecutors to track the law firm's bank account and identify Viola's supporters. But Dawn's conscience wouldn't allow her to remain silent when she discovered that prosecutors were withholding exculpatory evidence that could prove Viola's innocence. In an act of moral courage, she reached out to Viola directly, providing him with the hidden evidence and offering to testify about the prosecutorial misconduct she had witnessed. The response was swift and threatening. Prosecutors Casares and Bennett allegedly warned Dawn that she would face federal prison if she testified against them. The intimidation extended to her family, with Casares appearing at her parents' home, demanding to search for computers and hard drives. By early 2012, Dawn's fear had become so overwhelming that she temporarily moved back in with her parents, even hiding her car in their garage to avoid detection. Despite these precautions, she eventually returned to her apartment. Then came April 25, 2012. When Dawn's body was discovered following a welfare check requested by her father, the circumstances immediately raised red flags. 6 officers responded to the scene, an unusually large number for a routine wellness check. Even more troubling, Dawn's family was prevented from identifying her body. The scene itself presented a series of puzzling inconsistencies. Despite the pleasant spring weather and an open window, the apartment's heating system was running at 80 degrees. 2 unidentified cell phones were found in the apartment, neither belonging to Dawn. Most disturbingly, cell phone records would later reveal an outgoing call placed from one of these phones at 4:39 a.m. on the day her body was discovered, approximately 6 hours after her estimated time of death. While authorities quickly attributed Dawn's death to alcohol poisoning, citing a blood alcohol content of 0.59, this conclusion failed to address several crucial facts. Dawn's parents had emptied all alcohol from her apartment the night before she died. Additionally, there was no evidence of vomiting in the apartment, which would be expected with such extreme alcohol consumption. The investigation itself would later come under intense scrutiny. Detective John Morgan of the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Office would review the case file and discover that the Parma Police Department had failed to follow basic investigative procedures. No witnesses were interviewed. No area canvass was conducted. No attempt was made to retrieve surveillance footage from the apartment complex. Critical evidence, including Dawn's missing computer, was never pursued. Perhaps most telling was the actions of prosecutor Dan Casares on the day of Dawn's death. He disposed of his laptop computer. This fact would only come to light years later through public records requests. In 2023, attorney Kim Corral began assisting the Pella family in their quest for answers. The investigation revealed that multiple individuals had discussed Dawn's death as a murder, yet these leads were never pursued. The Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Office identified several key individuals who should have been interviewed, including attorney John Patrick, prosecutor Casares' brother, Susan Casares, and Catherine Clover. Adding another layer to this complex case, in June 2023, Mark Bennett, one of Dawn's former supervisors, faced the Ohio Supreme Court over allegations of sexual harassment against an intern. The court ultimately ruled against Bennett, sanctioning him for his misconduct. On August 16, 2023, Dawn's family and supporters gathered at Parma City Hall for a rally for justice. The demonstration came in response to the city's continued refusal to properly investigate Dawn's death or allow other law enforcement agencies to examine the case. Dawn's mother, Karen Pella, spoke at the rally, expressing frustration with the Parma Police Department's handling of new evidence that suggested foul play. "We went to the Parma police over a year ago in good faith," Karen stated, and provided them with a great deal of evidence that required an investigation by the proper authorities. The timing of Dawn's death, occurring precisely when she was scheduled to testify about prosecutorial misconduct, combined with the numerous irregularities at the scene and the subsequent inadequate investigation, continue to raise serious questions about what really happened to Dawn Pella. Today, more than a decade after her death, Dawn's case remains unsolved. A $10,000 reward stands for information leading to the arrest of a suspect in her death. The Pella family continues their fight for justice, supported by advocates who believe Dawn's death was far from accidental. For those who knew Dawn, the dedicated volunteer who would buy roses on her lunch break to give to strangers, the fierce advocate for truth who stood up against powerful figures, her loss represents not just a personal tragedy, but a troubling example of what can happen when those tasked with upholding justice might be the very ones subverting it. On July 30, 2016, in Honolulu, Hawaii, 21-year-old Jonathan Fraser vanished without a trace. His disappearance would eventually expose a dark underbelly of organized crime and reveal a possible revenge plot orchestrated by one of Hawaii's most notorious businessmen. 8 months before his disappearance, Jonathan was involved in a devastating car accident with his friend Caleb Misk at the intersection of Kaneohe Bay Drive and Makalani Street. While initial reports suggested Jonathan was driving, investigators later confirmed that Caleb Misk was behind the wheel. The collision left both men critically injured, but Caleb's injuries proved fatal. After spending 4 months in the hospital, Caleb succumbed to his injuries on March 12, 2016. Caleb's father, Michael Mike Misk Jr., a prominent Honolulu businessman with alleged ties to organized crime, publicly blamed Jonathan for his son's death, despite evidence to the contrary. The events leading to Jonathan's disappearance began with what appeared to be an innocent gesture. On July 30, 2016, Mike Misk arranged a spa day at Ko'olina for both Ashley Wong, Jonathan's girlfriend and mother of his unborn child, and Delia, Caleb's widow. Ashley last saw Jonathan at his apartment on Keokia Place around 9:30 that morning. It would be the final time anyone would see him alive. When Ashley couldn't reach Jonathan throughout the day, a horrifying realization dawned on her. The spa day may have been an elaborate setup to isolate Jonathan. 9 days later, Jonathan's gray 1994 Honda hatchback was discovered abandoned at the intersection of Summer Street and Coolio Road. The investigation took a significant turn on August 10, 2017, when authorities searched Mike Misk's 37.5-foot Boston whaler boat, nicknamed Painkiller. While investigators recovered SD cards, marine navigation systems, and knives, the evidence's connection to Jonathan's disappearance remained unclear. The breakthrough came on July 8, 2020, when federal agents arrested Michael J. Misk Jr. and several associates. The indictment revealed that Misk's pest control business allegedly served as a front for a criminal enterprise involved in drug trafficking, murder for hire, robbery, extortion, money laundering, and abduction. Ashley Wong later revealed she had begun recording phone conversations with Mike Misk after Jonathan's disappearance, suspecting his involvement. Despite extensive investigations, Jonathan's remains have never been found. Today, Mike Misk faces federal charges that could result in the death penalty if convicted. The trial is ongoing, and Jonathan Fraser's family continues to seek answers about what happened to their son on that summer day in 2016. On the morning of June 3, 2011, in the college town of Bloomington, Indiana, 20-year-old Lauren Spira vanished without a trace. The Indiana University sophomore's disappearance would launch one of the most extensive searches in the state's history and remain one of the most perplexing missing persons cases in America. Lauren, a petite fashion merchandising major from Scarsdale, New York, stood just 4'11" and weighed 95 pounds. Her disappearance began after what seemed like a typical Thursday night out with friends, but would spiral into a decades-long mystery that continues to haunt both the Bloomington community and her family. The timeline of June 2nd into June 3rd has been meticulously documented. At approximately 12:30 a.m., Lauren left her apartment at Smallwood Plaza with a friend, David Rohn. They went to fellow student Jay Rosenbaum's apartment, where they met with Jay's neighbor, Corey Rossman. The group, approximately 10 people, spent time drinking and reportedly using drugs. By 1:46 a.m., surveillance footage captured Lauren entering Kilroy's sports bar. When she left at 2:27 a.m. with Corey Rossman, she was barefoot, having left her shoes behind on the bar's sand-covered patio. What followed was a series of movements between various locations that investigators have scrutinized for years. The most crucial period began at 2:30 a.m., when Lauren and Corey arrived at Smallwood Plaza. A confrontation occurred between Corey and another student, Zach Oates, resulting in Corey being punched in the face. Security cameras then showed Lauren and Corey leaving through an alley at 2:51 a.m., heading toward the 5 North townhomes. The final confirmed sighting of Lauren came at 4:30 a.m., when Jay Rosenbaum reported seeing her at the intersection of 11th Street and College Avenue. She was heading south, still barefoot, wearing black leggings and a white shirt. This would be the last time anyone reported seeing Lauren Spira. When Lauren failed to return home, concern quickly escalated. Her boyfriend attempted to contact her, only to learn her phone had been left at Kilroy's sports bar. By afternoon, Lauren's roommate had met with her boyfriend, and together they filed a missing persons report with the Bloomington Police Department. The response was immediate and massive. Lauren's parents, Robert and Charlene Spira, arrived in Bloomington the very next day, launching what would become a tireless, decade-long search for their daughter. The community mobilized, with hundreds of volunteers combing through Bloomington's streets, alleys, and wooded areas. Within days, police identified 10 persons of interest. though these individuals were never publicly named. The investigation garnered national attention, with Lauren's case being featured on America's Most Wanted, generating over 350 tips. Celebrities, including Denise Richards and Donnie Wahlberg, used their platforms to amplify the search efforts. The investigation faced numerous challenges. While surveillance cameras captured parts of Lauren's movements that night, crucial gaps remained. The individuals last seen with Lauren hired attorneys and provided limited cooperation with investigators, according to Lauren's parents. This led to frustration and eventually civil litigation. In 2013, the Spearers filed a lawsuit against Corey Rossman, Jay Rosenbaum, and another student, Michael Beth, alleging negligence in their daughter's disappearance. The lawsuit was ultimately dismissed in 2014, with the judge ruling there wasn't sufficient evidence to prove the defendants were responsible for Lauren's disappearance. Over the years, various leads have emerged and been exhausted. In 2016, the FBI conducted a search of a property in Martinsville, Indiana, following a tip. In 2015, investigators explored possible connections between Lauren's disappearance and the murder of another Indiana University student, Hannah Wilson, though no definitive link was established. The investigation has taken numerous turns over the past decade. In 2021, a TikTok video claiming to have information about Lauren's whereabouts briefly renewed public interest. While Charlene Spearer forwarded this lead to authorities like she has with countless others, it ultimately led nowhere. The Bloomington Police Department maintains that Lauren's case remains active, not cold. Every tip, no matter how small, is investigated. The dramatic transformation of Bloomington's landscape over the past decade has complicated search efforts. The area where Lauren was last seen is now almost unrecognizable due to extensive development and construction. Perhaps most frustrating for investigators and the Spearer family is the wall of silence they've encountered. Despite thousands of tips and hundreds of interviews, key questions remain unanswered about what happened in those early morning hours of June 3, 2011. Lauren's mother, Charlene, continues to use social media to keep her daughter's case alive, regularly posting updates and appeals for information. On the 10th anniversary of Lauren's disappearance, she wrote, "Someone knows what happened to Lauren. Someone knows where Lauren is." Today, Lauren Spearer's disappearance remains one of Indiana's most haunting, unsolved mysteries. She would now be in her early 30s. Her case has led to increased campus security measures at Indiana University and sparked ongoing discussions about student safety in college towns. The case remains open, with Bloomington police still actively investigating any new leads. On May 24, 1990, a silver Oldsmobile Cutlass Calais sat idling on the westbound shoulder of Interstate 96 near Fowlerville, Michigan. The engine running, radio playing, and an open beer bottle inside, but no driver to be found. This was the last trace of 30-year-old Paige Rosy, a beloved substitute teacher whose disappearance would become one of Michigan's most baffling cold cases. Paige was more than just another missing person statistic. She was a dedicated preschool aide pursuing her degree in early childhood development. Those who knew her described her as hardworking and fun-loving. She was engaged to be married to Steve DeBranda, with her whole life ahead of her. The events of May 24th started routinely enough. Paige drove her mother to Detroit Metro Airport that morning. After saying goodbye, she made her way to visit a friend who had recently given birth. Between 2:30 and 2:45 p.m., surveillance footage captured her stopping at a store to purchase beer. What happened next would haunt investigators for decades. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Paige around 3:30 p.m., standing beside her vehicle on I-96, approximately half a mile from the Fowlerville exit. She wasn't alone. According to these witnesses, Paige was speaking with two unidentified men near a maroon or burgundy minivan. Some accounts suggest a third man may have been present. One witness detail would later prove particularly chilling. Paige was seen throwing her hands up in the air, while one of the men placed his hand on her shoulder. By 7:30 p.m., a concerned motorist who had passed by earlier noticed the Oldsmobile hadn't moved. Upon investigation, police found Paige's personal belongings exactly as she'd left them. Her shoes, wallet, and keys remained in the vehicle. The car, belonging to her mother's employer, showed no signs of damage or struggle. A significant detail emerged during the investigation. Prior to her disappearance, Paige had deposited a large sum of money into her account. That money has remained untouched since that day. Investigators also learned that during this period, there had been multiple reports of individuals impersonating police officers in the area. Despite extensive searches and thousands of tips over the years, Paige Rossy's fate remains unknown. Her physical description, blonde hair, blue eyes, surgical scars on her right leg and arm, and surgical screws in her left knee, remains on missing persons posters more than 3 decades later. In 2011, cadaver dogs indicated potential burial sites, but subsequent excavations yielded no results. The case has been featured on numerous billboards throughout Michigan, and in 2023, a documentary was announced to bring new attention to this haunting mystery. Today, the Livingston County Sheriff's Department Cold Case team continues to investigate what happened on that stretch of highway. The question remains, who were the men in the maroon minivan, and what became of Paige Rosy?